This week on the WriterCon podcast.
The one piece of advice that I would offer is not to ignore the seed. So I like to say, did a sequoia know that it was going to be a gigantic sequoia when it was just a baby seed?
Nice.
Likely not. I mean, maybe it had some idea, but I don't really think so. So what I like to say is if you get some sort of hit, some sort of idea, something that might not seem important, go ahead and jot it down. You know, I constantly do that in my iPhone, in my notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it could be the start of something. So I say, don't ignore that. Don't say, oh, that's nothing. If you feel it and you get the hit, make a note. And then I like to say, go back and water it. And see what it might grow into. Maybe a giant sequoia.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Hey there, writers. Thanks for joining me and my superstar author wife, Lara, and our superstar sound engineer, Jesse Ulrich. One of our news stories today actually relates to the Hugos and science fiction. And speaking of, Jesse is our science fiction expert. And you just got back from the Star Trek cruise, right? How was that?
I did. It was great. Listen, it's always great. Imagine being on a cruise ship, which if you don't like cruise ships, I understand. But imagine everyone on that cruise ship has the sort of central interest as you. And you get to spend an entire week with those people talking about the things you love the most. And it's great. And I love it.
So you can talk about things and they understand it. Do you all greet each other with the Vulcan?
Well, if you
greeting?
can, I actually can't do the Vulcan greeting, which is ironic.
On either hand?
Oh, no.
No, I can't. Yeah, me and Zachary Quinto, two people who can't do it.
Or Shatner. Remember, did you see Free Enterprise? They wired his fingers together so he could do this.
I will tell you, in rabbinical school, to help rabbis do that, they do tape their fingers together until they're able to do it. That's what I've learned. So maybe one day for the next Star Trek cruise, I'll tape my fingers together so I can actually do it.
That'd
be nice.
Go.
Yeah, I can't. This is can't. So, but yes, a lot of people do greet each other with that and lots of Klingon phrases and whatnot.
I would have to study up. Okay, so that was a fun cruise, but much more importantly, of course, in April, you're joining us for the WriterCon cruise, which will have fewer actors, but I like writers better anyway. Are you looking forward to that one?
I am. That one is certainly slightly more relaxing for me than the Star Trek cruise. But again,
you have to work on that one. How is that more relaxing?
I do, but I do get like some of them. I do get some of the mornings free because I'm not in the writing sessions. So, but like the thing I like about the Star Trek cruise, especially, and this relates to the WriterCon cruise, is I like hearing from creatives, not necessarily actors so much, but the people who do the writing and the producing, the creative parts of it. And so, spending time with people who are trying to create something is very energizing for me. So
I agree. How about you, Lara? Have you started packing your bag yet?
I actually have. Is that embarrassing to admit? Yes.
I was not expecting a yes on that one. Okay.
No, I'm already thinking about what I want to take. I'm already dreaming of the tropics and trying to decide which bathing suit I'll take and which of my Hawaiian shirts I want to take. And I'm super excited to go. I can't wait to be out on the ocean in my room with you and working with a great group of people. I spent, 6-7 hours writing today. I'm a little emotionally drained, but I get very recharged when I am working with other authors. So I think I'm going to be very ready for that.
That balcony in the room, with the ocean, that seems endless. To me, that's like the best writing environment on earth. So
I will say for one of my favorite parts of the WriterCon cruise last year was just the last night when the ships were sailing through, trying to avoid a thunderstorm, and you could see the thunderstorm, just the lightning from your balcony, and like you would hear oohs and ahs from other parts of the ship. And it was just it was a magical moment until you started thinking about what happened if a ship got struck by lightning, which then required me researching it. It's fine. They have lightning rods. It's okay. But it was beautiful to see a storm with like nothing surrounding except you and the other ship you could see. It was really magical and certainly creative. So
that would be different.
Very cool. I get distracted by nature, but I love the nature bathing. It's very, very good for me.
Yeah. Well, our interview today is with Kelly Anne Manuel, a children's book author who has made a huge splash. So don't stop listening just because you aren't writing children's books, because she has done something amazing you need to hear about. She has written and published 31 books at the same time in the same book launch. That's like one book for every day of the month, I guess, in 4 different series. We will talk to this remarkable writer, but first, the news. Well, we're right back to science fiction. So, Jesse, jump in anytime, talking about Worldcon and the Hugos and the huge controversy going on there. This is not the first time the Hugos have been controversial, and we'll talk about why. But this is another example of a story that I held back on until I actually had some information about not just what happened, but why. You may have already seen news reports alleging that the Hugo Awards handed out last year at the World Science Fiction Convention in Chengdu, China, were rigged. Just in case you don't know, there are 2 major science fiction awards. One's the Nebula, which is voted on by members of the organization, mostly writers, and the Hugo Awards, which are voted on by fans supposedly in attendance at Worldcon this year. Now, most science fiction conventions are kind of fan-run and amateur, but as they get bigger, there are some exceptions, like the big Comic Cons you probably heard about in San Diego or in New York. And there are some fan conventions that kind of outgrew the scale of volunteers and started chains and whatnot. But Chinese fandom, though strong, is apparently a different thing. And from what I've read, I get the impression that the convention committee didn't realize there was this thing called the Worldcon Constitution, which sets out rules for what they're supposed to do, nominating and voting and so forth. And before long, they apparently attracted the attention of the local Communist Party in the middle of an authoritarian clampdown that's been intensifying in China for several years, and perhaps the organizers panicked. Here's what we know. First, they arbitrarily disqualified a couple of very popular books by authors because they thought the books might offend the local Communist Party if they won. Or worse, the author showed up and gave an acceptance speech. The most glaring oversight was by the author R.F. Kuang, a book called Babel. I think you've got a graphic for this, Jesse. It's Babel on the Necessity of Violence, an Arcane History of the Oxford Translators' Revolution. This is a best-selling, highly acclaimed work. It's already won the Nebula Award. It's also won the Locus Award for Best Fantasy Novel, and that's also a major award. So first problem, books being disqualified for no legit reason. Second, they dragged their heels on releasing vote counts, which has made everything else more suspicious. And when they were released, after the awards were handed out, there were discrepancies in the vote count, which has just led to an increasing feeling amongst fans that this thing was basically rigged. What do you think, Jesse? You're our expert in this field.
I mean, so like one of the, I can't remember which scandal it was, but like a writer like Neil Gaiman was disqualified for one of these awards. And like, here's the thing. A lot of people live in China.
Yeah.
China is a world power. I get from a business perspective not wanting to upset them. But again, just like what we're dealing here with the goblin butts, like literature and creativity should not be restrained. You should be allowed to criticize your government. That's one of my, if I had like a list of like 5 ideals, one of them is like governments that punish people for criticizing them are not governments you want to be living under. And we should not, just because we're afraid to not make some money, we shouldn't be scared of upsetting China. We shouldn't be scared of upsetting anyone.
I should probably have explained that the Worldcon is not always in China. It moves every year. Various committees in different cities actually vote or bid. It's like a bidding war. And
like
China won. Go ahead. Yeah,
like the
Olympics. That's exactly right. And, whatever else was going on with books, and this is what I was waiting for, it's since been revealed that investment deals valued at over $1 billion were signed at the 81st World Science Fiction Convention in Chengdu. So it was a major commercial enterprise for someone, although obviously not the authors who didn't win because their books were disqualified. Lara, how does that make you feel about these people being in charge of the Hugo Awards?
Not great. I just feel like they were
a leading question, as lawyers say, I think.
in over their heads a little bit. I'm kind of trying to be gentle about this. I absolutely agree with Jesse, but we are living somewhere where it's okay for us to say that, and we can behave in a certain way. And it sounds like they got a little over their heads there, and they probably did the best they could. It just feels like a bad situation all around.
Well, and particularly harmful for writers like the author of Babel, who, let's face it, odds are would have won this, except that he wasn't nominated. Who to have a triple award winner like that, the triple crown of science fiction, those opportunities aren't going to come very often. And this is just very sad.
Well, and it makes us then, it devalues the award in some way, because now when we look back, we'll forever be saying, but that person should have won. That would have won. When you don't have a fair fight, he missed. Yes, that author missed out on winning, but now how does the person who did win it feel? I wouldn't feel good about that. I would think that I wasn't the rightful person. It just tarnishes the entire award.
Yeah, agree. Okay, news story number 2. This has got a good headline. Reading is sexy.
I've been saying that for decades.
Well, me too. But sometimes I've had trouble convincing others, but now it's in the Guardian, so it must be true. You've already got that article up there. So about a week or so ago, the 22-year-old model, that's who you're looking at if you're seeing the YouTube version, Kaya Gerber, launched her own book club called Library Science. She's also on the cover of British Vogue right now with her supermodel mom, who, by the way, is Cindy Crawford. And she's describing this library science thing as, quote, a platform for sharing books, featuring new writers, hosting conversations with artists we admire, and continuing to build a community of people who are as excited about literature as I am. Books have always been the great love of my life. Reading is so sexy. Where was she when I was a teenager? We live in a world where we know book sales for young people are up. And perhaps most interestingly, it's paper sales that are booming, not digital. Is it possible then that Gen Z can do for paper books what it's already done for vinyl records, not only bring them back, but make them, last year for the first time, vinyl records sold better than CDs did.
I should mention, doing that.
Yeah. And Gerber's not alone. Another 28-year-old model, Kendall Jenner, maybe a familiar name to some of you, is now the unofficial face of the new Lit Girls Club. When she was pictured on a yacht off the Côte d'Azur reading a book. And FYI, her body was covered with green Post-it notes. Okay, Jesse, can we take this seriously? And I'm not dissing models at all, but this is not really what you expect typically fashion models to be doing. Why do we have people who, their job is looking good and modeling clothes and whatnot, and now they're wanting to be taken seriously as literary people? What do you think?
Well, I think it's part of a larger trend that is kind of like, looking back on it, kind of makes sense, where for the generation that grew up in our sort of oversaturated information, bombast, constant awareness of what everyone is doing society,
right,
would want to slow down and do things that are more personal and slower. Like, for example, reading a physical book and listening to a vinyl record. Like, it makes sense that people would come back to a thing that is much more engrossing and forces you to separate yourself from the greater outside world. So I think this is great. Yeah. Like, buy more books, right?
Yeah, well, and if it comes at a time when book sales are increasing amongst young people, their target audience, whether they're talking about books or clothes or anything else, maybe this is time. I mean, maybe there's going to be more marketing to book readers. Wouldn't that be sweet? Lara, let me ask you this. Most of these models, in fact, everyone I saw when I was preparing this, they're all reading books by other female authors. Some of them are romantasy. Some are more nonfiction or on the literary side. Do you think that's significant?
I think that works in with the statistics that we've seen. I think they are younger, young women. And I do think that romance and romantasy and women's fiction is big with that demographic.
Yeah.
Romantasy especially makes sense to me. These are the kids who grew up with Harry Potter books. Right. Very much enjoyed having magic and creatures and fantastical elements in their books. So now combining it with romance and moving into new adult just makes sense. I think that's, in my mind, that was a natural progression there. It makes sense to me that they're enjoying those. And then, of course, we've heard that the older generation seems to veer more towards mysteries and thrillers still. But this is the Colleen Hoover era, and it makes absolute sense to me.
I just like the headline, "Reading is so sexy." That should be on our T-shirts at WriterCon this year, don't you think?
Let's get behind that.
Reading maybe with a photograph of several of gorgeous models reading books or something, or maybe just regular people, because reading is sexy. You don't have to dress for it, right? That's the good thing. All right. Jesse, cue up that music and let's talk to Kelly Anne Manuel. Kelly Anne, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Okay, traditional first question. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
Gosh, the one piece of advice that I would offer is not to ignore the seed. So I like to say, did a sequoia know that it was going to be a gigantic sequoia when it was just a baby seed?
Nice.
Likely not. I mean, maybe it had some idea, but I don't really think so. So what I like to say is, if you get some sort of hit, some sort of idea, something that might not seem important, go ahead and jot it down. I constantly do that in my iPhone, in my notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it could be the start of something. So I say, don't ignore that. Don't say, oh, that's nothing. If you feel it and you get the hit, make a note. And then I like to say, go back and water it.
Mm.
And see what it might grow into. Maybe a giant sequoia.
Nice. Okay, tell us about this amazing book launch you're doing. 31 books, children's books, but still 31 in 4 different series. I said that like I don't think children's books are really books. All I'm saying is that they're shorter, but
They are
31
shorter.
is a
They
lot.
are.
And 4 different series. How did this all happen?
Well, I call myself an uncommon author because I wasn't writing at all. And I only started writing in early spring of 2022. So I started writing early spring, and I had, in 14 days, I had 27 of the books ready to go. 27 books in 14 days. Now, they all rhyme. They're all nursery rhymes. So I like to reference Hans Christian Andersen as somebody to give you an idea of how the books go. They rhyme very much like an inchworm or a thumbelina. And so, I had 27 books in 14 days, and I even curated all the art for all of them in those days. And then I had the entire 31 within the next week. And I just started writing then. So I said, what am I going to do? I've got to publish. And I did hybrid self-publishing. So within 6 months of writing the books, I had all 31 published in 6 months.
Now tell me, I'm jumping in here, but tell me what you mean by hybrid self-publishing, because people use hybrid in several different ways.
Very fair. So I went through Balboa Press. With Balboa Press, you do go through content review. So you don't just get to publish whatever you want. They have to accept your book. So, the thing is, you're funding it, right? You're funding your book to be published, but they have to approve the content. So it's not just complete self-publishing. And then they create the ISBNs, and then they put it out through their channels to disperse the books, right? And so that's how I did it. Really, there was no other option at the time, or even really still. So I wrote all these books, and I'm like, what do I do? How do I get these out into the world? And, I just followed my intuition. I did homework online. I found Hay House. I was always fascinated by Louise Hay. So that was sort of my lead in. And then, of course, they publish out of Bloomington, Indiana. And I went to IU. I went to Indiana University. So I saw all these things as sort of hits. And I just went for it. And my first book was published in time to go to the ALA, to the conference in DC that year. And I met one of the people from the company, and I said, look, I have 30 more. I'd like to talk to you about not paying what I paid.
You don't hear that every day.
I don't know that they believed me. But I said, I have 30 more, but I'd like to not pay what I paid to publish one. So I tried to just at least negotiate a little bit of a better price point. And then I submitted all the materials in July for the other 30 books. And the hardest part of that was the synopsises. So I spent a lot, because children's books to me are very important as far as what can a parent, caregiver, teacher, librarian, whomever is interacting with the book and the child, the synopsis to me is very important. So I spent a lot of time in July creating the synopsises for the 30 books. Then everything was published in August and September. And then I turned them all into audio and video.
And video, what do you mean by that?
Vimeo. So
Vimeo. I'm sorry, I gotcha.
You can get the video book, and the book, you can read through it and the words pop up, and it's just really cool.
And you're even at the Golden Globes this year promoting your work, right? Tell us about that.
Oh my gosh. My PR company is just fantastic, right? So you write 31 books, but nobody knows you. Nobody knows me, right? So I hired the Black Chateau Enterprises and started with them about a year ago.
Desiree Duffy, right?
Yes. That's how I'm getting to speak with you two. So I hired them, and we started a year ago. And so in October, I got an email saying, hey, there's this DPA gifting suite for the pre-Golden Globes is the name of the event. And we'd like to invite you to come if you'd like to come. I was like, would I like to come? So what you do is the book has to be approved by the lady that's in charge, and it's her company, the DPA Gifting Suite. So I did The Catch Your Dream, one of my books that's about boundaries. So I feel it's a very impactful book. So I took The Catch Your Dream and I gave it to the people at the top of their creative game. These are people who are in the industry, whether they're producers, whether they're buying the products to be on Ted Lasso, whether they're the actors in like the movie Air. I met the actor that played Michael Jordan, whether they're cast members from Jury Duty. So, I mean, this was incredible. And to give them the book and tell them about my journey, what shocked me the most was they congratulated me. When here they are at the top of their game being nominated, and they were telling me congratulations. No. I can't tell you what that did for me as an author, the validation that came.
That's nice.
Very cool. Your press materials describe you as an eternal optimist who is the good kind of contagious. Could you talk to us about that a little bit?
That has to do with my personality. I have what I consider to be a light energy about me. And that's what comes through in my stories. And what I do is I write from my inner child to children. I do not write as an adult to a child. And I believe that my light energy, my optimism, the resilience that I have gained and the coping skills I've gained from 55 years on the planet, where a lot of things have occurred, have all kind of bundled together into making me this uncommon author with a very unique voice that I believe children respond to because of everything I've just said.
You've also said, let's keep going on that. You've also said you didn't set out to write children's books, but then you happily took that path when it came your way. So are you saying you started writing books by accident, or what does that mean exactly?
That would be hard to do.
That means that I did a lot of work on myself. And at some point early that spring of 2022, I started to literally hear poetry in my head. I would hear the poetry and I started to write the poetry. Then I realized that poetry was meant to be converted to nursery rhyme format for children. I call it like a Field of Dreams type of story, where Kevin Costner's character is like getting all these ideas that are a little bit odd. And what I would say those were intuitive hits. Back when that movie was made, I didn't even know what that was. So what happened was I just heard the poetry. I knew I was meant to get it in the hands of children in a nursery rhyme format. It literally just happened, just sort of like his character in Field of Dreams. And then I would get ideas and hits, and I would take those steps, like finding a publishing company, going to the ALA, having that meeting, that happenstance meeting. And everything has just unrolled in that format. So no, I did not. I did not set out to write the books. I say that I heard some sort of collective childhood call and I answered it.
And it drew you to the children's books. That's interesting. Yeah. Do you think you'll move on to something for more mature readers, or do you feel like you are in your lane and that you will stay there?
I'm glad you asked. I'm curating my contemporary poetry collection as well.
Okay.
And I have at least, I'd say 70 poems that are pretty close, I think, to being ready to be published. So I'm doing both because what I would love, so my books are a layer of support for children, whether to encourage outdoor play or whether to help them with grief and loss and endings. So what the goal would be grow up with my poetry and my nursery rhymes and then age up into my contemporary poetry so that you have support from me your entire life.
Mm-hmm. You kind of touched on this before, Kelly Anne, but I read an interview where you were talking about meeting the child where they are in their journey. What does that mean?
Okay, that means that I write in a way that will the child will resonate on some level, no matter where they are in their learning or their family life or their situation. So, for example, I wrote a book called The Loss Total. I flipped titles. So I had a devastating fire. The fire was coined a total loss. Okay. So the loss total, it's about a visit from the lost total who made me feel empty, sad, and awful. That book is about loss and grief. Now, for one child, that could be losing their T-ball game. That could be getting a bad grade on a report card. For another child, that a loss could be the death of, say, a grandparent, or a divorce, or a parent going to serve in the military could feel like a loss total. So the book covers different layers of endings and loss, but whatever the child is at in their life, the book will meet them there and give them a layer of support and maybe some verbiage and some self-talk that can be helpful. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does.
We have a lot of aspiring writers in our audience. Can you tell us what a typical writing day looks like for you? Maybe discuss your process a little bit.
Yeah, that's funny because I just write when I'm inspired. So like one of my books is called The Boots Rain instead of Rain Boots. And I was inspired to write that when I was putting on my boots to walk my dog in the rain. And I thought, what if the boots fell down from the sky instead of being on my feet? Right. And so the poem came, and I'm typing it in the phone as I'm walking the dog. That's where I talk about not ignoring the seed or the spark or the moment of inspiration, because you may be making coffee or folding laundry or taking a child to a doctor appointment and you get a hit. Note the hit. That's how I write. So sometimes it'll be an event, like the fire was a total loss and the loss total came, right? So it can be something I've experienced. And then some of more of my contemporary poetry can be tied to current events or historic events that I either see a movie about or read about, and I'll get a hit and I'll be like, I want to write a poem, like Aberfan, the horrible incident in England where there was a mine. I don't know if you're familiar with Aberfan. It was where a mine, there was like a landslide due to a mine, and it devastated a town. And I got a poem for Aberfan because unfortunately there was a school at the base of that, where that accident was. And I got a poem for that town and for the children that were lost. So it can be an event, it can be something historic, or it can be something current. And I get the hit, and I just write. So it's really hard for me to describe really any kind of ritual, because for me, it's extremely spontaneous.
Well, Kelly Anne, I normally wrap things up by asking about what you're working on next. Of course, you already mentioned the poetry book. What else? Or talk more about that. What's on the horizon for you?
Well, gosh, I mean, I have so many more nursery rhymes to add to all the 4 series. That's a given. I'm working on the contemporary poetry. I also paint. I love to paint. So that's another creative outlet for me. And one day I wonder, could the painting go from hobby to gallery? So I would say I just am having a creative burst, and it's coming out in all kinds of ways, whether it's the contemporary poetry, whether it's the children's books, whether it's the painting, whether it's photography. I am kind of on creative fire.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. You guys are fantastic. And I was a little intimidated by your resumes. So thank you for being so calm. I mean,
It's all those books behind you, isn't that? That's what it is.
I just appreciate you having me.
It's our pleasure. You've brought a lot of sunshine into everybody's life today. Thanks so much, and talk to you again soon, I hope.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Just a few parting words. Lara, tell us more about the WriterCon cruise, because it is not too late yet to register, but it will be soon. Lara?
Let me think. What have we not talked about yet? Have we talked about who else is coming with us?
We had Lauren Smith on last week.
That's true. We talked about Lauren. Lauren is coming, and I'm super excited she's joining us. Laurel is going to be returning, and she'll be teaching with us. I love Laurel Thomas. She is a darling, and she may be soft-spoken, but that is a powerful woman with words of wisdom to share with us. We are also adding this year Tamara Grantham, who will be speaking on fantasy and romantasy. We will have RJ Johnson, who's going to be there speaking about science fiction. Who else? Maybe Jesse. Jesse will be there. Keeping things fun.
That's a reason to come on its own, right?
Really
there,
is.
Man.
I've been told I'm the life of the party. That's what people have told me.
I can't. We had so much fun when we had game night last year, and I
still have the hat.
Good at karaoke too. Yeah.
That was excellent memories, fun times. You were a riot during game night. That was
also there's some teaching and stuff on this thing.
Yes. Oh yes, of course. Why do I always shift over to the fun stuff? No, well, I'll be teaching, so we'll meet every morning. We will have some really in-depth instruction. We're going to base that on wherever you are in your writing. So we are going to ask you, what do you need from us? And we're going to make sure that you get it. We'll tailor those morning sessions to meet your needs. We will link you up with whoever you need to meet with individually. You'll get one-on-one instruction from pretty much any or all of the instructors and presenters who are going to be there. Catherine Sands is coming. What other cruise can you go on where you get to speak with an agent, somebody who might even consider picking up your work and representing it, or might be able to connect you with someone else who can?
Right. And just to be clear, every single person with us on the cruise, unless they don't want to, will have a chance to speak one-on-one and pitch or just talk to Catherine, who is a very prominent agent.
Or any of us, or me.
Well, that's true too. You're a very prominent superstar writer. I think I said that at the opening, so
silly.
That makes it true. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Until next time, you keep writing, and remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.